Wow, that is a lot of familiar faces out there. Good to see you all. Thanks for coming today. Yeah, so today, kind of a free form meeting, partly just to see each other again. We got kind of used to seeing each other on at least once a year or so, and it's a little different now, and a lot of things have changed. And so coming together here today, sharing some stories, maybe sharing some grief, and just come together a little bit. I think it'd be a good thing to start off with prayer and some Thanksgiving. And I've asked my friend Shore to do that for us here to start us off on a good foot. And Shore, if you're ready back there,
Well, I'm just going to invite everybody to take a nice deep breath. Feel the connection from your head to the heavens and your feet to the earth. I want us to give gratitude and feel the ancestors at our back. All those that have come before, all those that have journeyed, loved, lost, had curiosity, adventures, and challenges, and how much is behind us, supporting us. And give gratitude to those that are present now in all the different ways that they live life. I want to give gratitude for the future generations, for the ones who have yet to come, all of the ways that they help to call us up to be our best, to think of what we're leaving for them, how they will feel us at their back. I want to give gratitude to the earth itself, all the different expressions that she offers, from the valleys to the hills, the caves, the flatlands, the places that the earth meets the water. Such beauty. I want to offer gratitude to all of the waters in the sky and the waters in the earth, the waters in our bodies, the waters that move and the waters that collect, all the different waters that allow us life. I want to give gratitude for the beings that live in those waters, from the very, very smallest to the very, very largest, to the different shapes and sizes, the different ways of movement, and all the teaching that they offer back to us. I want to give gratitude to the nation that uses the air to move through, all the different ways that they make sound, that they travel, that they demonstrate balance, that they demonstrate the perspectives of above and below, the dedication to movement, all the lessons they teach us. Thank you. I want to give gratitude to the plant nation and all of the different ways that they support us, from our food to our medicines to the very air we breathe, and also to our own shelters and the fire that keeps us warm. So much gratitude for the lessons you offer us. Gratitude to all of the animal nation, all the different ways that they're covered, all the different ways they move. In our youth program, they always say, don't forget the hoppers and the slitherer. Thank you for all of the gifts and lessons you teach us. I want to stretch our awareness out and give gratitude in all the directions. Honor the thunder beings that bring the electricity into the earth. Gratitude for all of the celestial beings, the ones we know and the ones we don't know. Gratitude to the sun for the rhythm of day and night. Gratitude to the moon for the rhythm of the months and the tides. Gratitude to the stars for the stories they hold and the ways that they hold our directions so that we can find ours. Gratitude to the wisdom keepers, the bundle carriers, and the teachers, the enlightened ones, the ones who have dedicated their entire lives to being in service to future generations. Gratitude to the mystery of all of the things we don't even know to say thank you for. Gratitude to the seen and the unseen world, to all expressions of life and all that supports life. And finally, an apology, because for some, this may have seemed like long time for words, but it seems so small in comparison to what it offers back to us. Thank you for hearing my words. I've done my best to bring our hearts and minds together as one.
Thank you so much, Shore. That was really good. It's nice just to sit in gratitude for a little bit like that. Yeah, big deep breath. Sure do miss Tom almost every day. He was a big part of all of our lives. Of course, he'd probably be pissed off if he thought we were mourning too much. Say, what the hell are you doing? Get back out there, follow your vision. And yeah, we're all doing that, but it's still, there's still that little bit of emptiness, not around to play with anymore. So we, good Lord. So we share some stories today. We share some grief and hope to adjust to it. I mean, the grief and mourning that a lot of us feel, it's not like you just do a few things and it's gone, right? This is something you adapt to, and with time it gets better, and that's what we can all hope for, right? Um, I did want to say thanks to Jorge in particular here. He had been instrumental in kind of laying out the idea for this and for next week's class. Uh, getting beyond grief and mourning. And Jorge, if you're willing, I'd like to hear your voice if you can do so.
Good morning. Um, it's been very difficult the last few months, and I told you a couple of days ago when we spoke on the phone that um, he came on a dream 2 nights ago, and I found myself crying, and I woke up crying. Um, still, I'm not going to talk about the dream because I will always talk about that with River if he's interested, his son. But Dad told me how much I'm still missing. Did we see eye to eye? A lot of the times I upset him really bad. Um, and there were disagreements, but overall, he was my teacher and he changed my life. I think next week has been a very important gathering for all of us that um, still walking the path and still trying to hold by the hands the people that are coming in, that are joining us in this love for the earth. So I'm not going to talk too much now, but I'm still grieving. And yes, you're right. You're absolutely right, Dave. He will be probably making fun of me. Like he made fun of me the last day that we spoke in the hospital before he couldn't speak anymore. But the last word out of his mouth was making fun of me. And make me very uncomfortable, embarrassed in front of the nurses, as you can imagine. But yes, we need to take the time to acknowledge this. We need to feel it, see it, talk about it, stories, and then we need to regroup and get up the lens, stand up, and just keep doing it. Like he probably wanted us to do. Did he taught us everything that he knew? No, he took stuff with him, but we have enough tools and knowledge and experience to keep going now. And I'm just gonna leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jorge. Yeah, Tom did have a peculiar sense of humor sometimes. Uh, and he did like to joke around quite a bit. Um, Later on, I'll probably play a little clip of some of the shenanigans that went on in the studio. That it's actually all Charlie's fault because he instigated some of the clever, creative coffee mugs that are in the studio, but you'll see that in a little bit. Uh, but yeah, right now, would any of the other elders here want to say something? You can just raise your hand or whatever. Use a little hand raise icon. It can be a story, it can be a reflection, it can be just about anything you want. Meredith.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to probably pop in throughout this session when stuff comes to me. I'm so glad all of you are here. I really am. It is so comforting to see so many faces and know so many people are out there as we make this transition. We all have our stories of Tom. And when Dave was talking and he says, I miss that old man almost every day. Silly things for me were just before and online, we would always have these intimate donuts. They were crap for you, but Tom absolutely loved them. They were waxy goodness. I think Dave coined that phrase. And I think it was about a week afterwards, And I was just going down the aisle of the grocery store. And I went, oh, geez. Oh, next online, oh, that's right. I don't have to pick them up anymore. So those are the little ways for me that it hits home. Um, and as both Dave and Jorge has said, I always feel Tom saying, oh, for blank's sake, stop warning me. and I, in my heart, speak back and say, tough shit, old man. If you weren't such a dear, beautiful person, this would be easy. But it's not. So I would invite you, as the two of them had said, to move through the grief, express it. The things that pissed you off, the things that made you happy, the stories. They are hugely valuable to us. And it will knit us together to go forward. Shana.
Thanks, Meredith. We'll open this up for just general comments here in a little bit, but I did want to hear from the rest of the elders. So, Randy, if you'd like to speak.
Thanks, Dave. Hopefully I can figure out how to lower my hand. There we go. Hi, everyone. Wow, it just shows Tom's power to see so many people here. And what a community. I mean, oh man. And I wanted to talk about some of the introspection I've been doing since Tom passed. It's a lot of soul searching, a couple of epiphanies, thinking back about how Tom changed my life right from the get-go. I was 42 years old when I came to my standard class. And I'm asking myself the question, when was Tom not coyote teaching? Coyote teaching the people around him, coyote teaching me, coyote teaching whole classes. And I can't think of when he wasn't doing that. And I think about how much he taught me about myself and made me do some really hard work to get through some of my bullshit. And part of that bullshit is expectations. Tom would text me, I'm going to call you tomorrow. And the next day I would be ready. I'd even turn my phone ringer on. I didn't want to miss that call, because if you called and you didn't pick up, forget about calling him back or anything. And when he wouldn't call, I would think, I would, self-doubt. Well, is Tom pissed at me? What's this or that? And then the self-doubt could turn to, it didn't always, because eventually I learned to let go of my expectations. But my expectation would be, come on, man, you said you were going to do this and you're not doing it. And I'd be pissed at him. And I could see how in the past, people who loved Tom and were there for him got fooled by their expectations and got pissed at Tom and left instead of owning up to their own issues. And many of those people came back after they figured it out for themselves and their issues. But learning to let go of my expectations was one of the biggest teachers he gave me. Teachings. Not that they don't catch me sometimes, but at least I can recognize it when it happens. And take a deep breath and wait, or own up to my part of that equation. That I have this expectation that's unfulfilled. And what can I learn from that? And I learned a lot from that. I learned how to backtrack how I fuck myself up emotionally and mentally sometimes. He never said a word about it, right? He just, through his behavior, taught me so much about myself. And then, so how about the stuff that he taught me that was seemingly straightforward? I want to leave it there for now. That's the point I wanted to make. Ask that question. When was Tom, not Coyote, teaching us? Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, Randy. It, you speak of getting rid of expectations, and I remember a game Tom used to play with Jorge all the time, as far as not having too many expectations. Jorge would have, a couple weeks before a class, Jorge would be, Tom, what do you need? I'm gonna get things ready for the class. And Tom would say, oh, it shouldn't be anything. We're basically ready. And Jorge would go on about, getting food and volunteers and interns and stuff squared away. And quite often, I mean, we would joke about this because it'd be like an hour before class is gonna start. Tom would call Jorge over and he'd be like, Jorge, I'm gonna need, let me think, I'm gonna need 2 llamas, a roll of duct tape, and a 2-inch piece of peeled ginger root. Oh, and some compasses for the whole class. And Tom expected all of us. I mean, you could have some expectations, but to be like the coyote and to be able to just roll with the punches and still make stuff happen, that was one of the big lessons that he taught all of us. Uh, so so Elizabeth, I think you had something you wanted to say as well. Are you ready to go out there?
Sure. Thank you. You know, it's okay to grieve. It's important to grieve and mourn. Even Tom, with all of his skills, when he was following the trail that grandfather had left, his grandfather went on his final walk, he knew when he reached a point that he should go no further. And he wept. Now, it's good, it's important to allow the tears to fall onto Mother Earth, to express our grief at our teacher, our friend, our brother, at his passing. If we don't express that kind of stuff, of course, it's just going to fester if we suppress it. So it's very important to move it out of us. And Jorge mentioned about picking up the lance. Tom would often say that when we die, when we pass to the spirit world, it's a graduation. And I think in some ways, this is our own graduation to really do the mourning, yes, but then pick up that lance, embrace the teachings even more, do what we can on this beautiful earth while we are here physically alive. Tom touched so many lives. not the least of which is the Tracker family's lives. You know, we're here because of him. And so as we go through this mourning process, as well as we pick up the lance, as Jorge said, it's so important to come together stronger than ever so that our grief doesn't tear us apart, but brings us together, much as one mind and one heart. That is the Tracker family. So I love you all very much. I'm so glad to be a part of this family with you. And that's it for me for now. Thank you.
One mind and one heart. Yep. Thanks, Elizabeth. We also have Nancy. I see you out there. I feel like saying something here, Nance.
Got it. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Well, this is a pretty intense day. I'm seeing 265 people in this room, which is a fraction of the Tracker whole, but there's 265 people that can go out and speak about Tom and help others with their grief, which is a pretty powerful thing. And we have Tom to thank for that, the purity in which he taught. Meredith talked about the donuts. So every online class, I'd go to Costco, buy the big 24 pack of eggs, and proceed to boil like at least 18 of them to make deviled eggs to bring to Tom, and put them on a big tray. And he just gobbled them up. You know, and if that's one little thing that made him happy, I was more than glad to cook those eggs and spend the morning getting them ready because it pleased him. And we can please him by being ourselves and going out and embodying all that he taught, which is why he taught, which is pretty amazing. And I had one exercise he led in one of the onlines right towards the very end, a spiritual exercise to speak to the spirit that would come to you. And one came to me, large size, didn't solidify in a form, but was a shape of a man. And I pretty much knew who it was. And I asked him, what do you have to say to me? It was per his directions for the meditation. And he said, what have you learned by watching me all these years? And not a day goes by where that does not come up to me, in the little things, in the big things. I think I started in 84. I'm not sure. I moved to Jersey in 89, began working for him part-time in 92 or 93. And that's where I've been all my adult life. So yeah, I did learn by watching him because so much of what he taught was visual, spiritual when you'd think about it. What was he trying to say or not say? Because there'd be times when he ignored us or he got mad at us for something. And we just absorbed it, passed it on, because of course he needed an outlet. That's what we were there for. Painful or not. Elizabeth reminded me of something about suppressing grief. Personally, I know of someone whose brother died horrifically, and that grief was buried, not acknowledged, not dealt with, and would manifest in absolute anger at anyone, anything. And it ate them inside out. And I really don't want to see that happen to anybody in our tracker family. We're always here for you, us elders. trackersforelder@gmail.com. Over the years, we've had lots of people writing to us, and that's what we're here for. And I did see grief pass on Tom's face sometimes, but he was very quiet about it. And one time he was in the doghouse, and I know Elizabeth noticed it. He was upset, almost to the point of tears, but he didn't want to talk about it. And I thought on it for a little while, took it to a quiet place inside of me. And I did never get to confirm it with him, but the story that he told about the old woman and grandfather and the healing, I believe the house that took place in had been demolished. I had stopped and spoken because I knew Tom knew the folks that lived there. And I stopped and talked to him one day because I just in a vision said, yeah, stop the car and talk. So I did. And they were moving down south and they'd sold the house. And I had let Tom know about that. And that all came flashing back. And of course, I hugged him. And I think in my heart, I know that's what it was. But there's also the level of grief that I feel from his boys. I didn't get to spend a lot of time with Tommy. I did once in what he called the ultimate class, which was a riot. Young Tommy came along with us, and Tom said, "Can you keep an eye on Tommy for me?" And I said, "Sure, of course I can." So he's a wild child, but it was all good. And then along came Cody and River, and then I was with them. River from birth, Cody was, I think, 2, up until junior high, when Tom and Deb were divorced. But I remain close to the 2 brothers to this day. And I haven't felt the pain of Tom's loss personally. But when I think about his boys losing their dad, yeah, I'm feeling it right now. The pain that they're feeling. So I think that's what comes with someone who feels emotions, as I think we all do. We're pretty all much in that same boat. So we'll keep going with the online classes. River will be handling the physical classes, and we'll be here to help online classes. Hopefully we'll get philosophy classes up and running again. River's got the notebooks for us elders to begin that process. Malcolm will be. As long as we can get through this grieving time, this mourning time, process it, understand it. The class that begins on Monday will be dealing with that and exercises. And maybe a few stories as well, but a lot of practical information on what we can do as individuals in a community to forward this in the manner that Tom envisioned. There were about 4 of us that Tom laid out directions to while he was in the hospital. And that's what we're working to do, is to continue this all in a pure way. So thank you, David, for the time. And everybody, I love you greatly. And we will walk through this upright and vertical. Shana.
Upright and vertical, huh? I should hope so. I'd like to next call up the person who was traditionally in charge of coffee cup procurement at the online classes, Mr. Charlie Blackwell.
Well, thank you. And Dave's a dick. Most of you, if not all of you, have no idea what that is, but for I don't know how many classes Tom would use that as a prompt, you know. So for Dave, as he's turning on the audio and the video, and Dave is like, all right, and the audio is gonna go, and then Tom would go, dick, and break up laughing. So then David has to like pause. Okay, now the audio goes on. So if you're ever in a class and all of a sudden Tom comes back after a break, or the first thing that when he starts up and he's kind of laughing, usually it was at somebody's expense in the studio. Dave wasn't the only target, of course. Oh gosh, I miss him too. I remember him talking about how he would see grandfather standing in the back of a class as he's teaching, or he would see him around all the time. And I can't help but also get the feeling that now Tom's there all the time. When I'm doing something important, when I'm trying to pull out a skill or going through the notebooks looking for some obscure quote that I couldn't find, I could feel him in there watching me, and I can't help but feel the need to live up to it. It's boy, it's just so much more stronger motivation now to having to live up to what he asked of us. I can start to feel just start to feel the emptiness that he felt when grandfather left, and yet the connection that he was able to maintain and carry on with him. There was a point, who knows how many years ago now, probably trying to think, back in the 2010s, maybe 2009, but appropriate, but sure, why not? Anyway, I'd asked Tom this question about how in one of the classes I was helping another student, and we philosophy 1 kind of paired up, and go to your partner's house. I don't know how many people have the philosophy 1, but he teaches a way that you can spiritually go and visit a place and see things that are there and then verify it. And the easiest way to do that was to go to your partner's house and verify it. And I saw my partner's wife with a tattoo, and she was in the shower, and it's like, Tom, how could this be? I mean, it's like, isn't that a violation? And he says, well, did you see anything besides the tattoo? Well, no, Tom, but still, it feels kind of weird. And then he told me a story about how for one of the Coyote Thunder members, he would write in the mirrors, fog in the mirror when the guy's taking a shower, and write a word on it. I said, you gotta be kidding me. That's, it's like, oh yeah, you'd be surprised at the things that you could do. And then, sorry, Meredith, but for the next year and a half, and that's like an honest year at least, if not a year and a half, every time that me and my wife, sorry, we're about to do something that married people do, the marital obligations, as they're sometimes called. the damn phone would ring and it would be Tom, and he's like, "Hey, are you busy?" And then he'd hang up. And I mean, if this was like morning fun time or evening fun time or weekend afternoon fun time, whatever you want to, the damn phone would ring, and it's like, all right, I get it. You can you can connect. You can. Spirit is everywhere. You can follow everything else. Just please leave me alone. And he never admitted to it, even when I brought it up to him. He's like, "Well, oh, geez, no, of course I wouldn't know. How could I know that you're? I mean, look at you. You're probably not even getting any." Oh, Jesus Christ. I, what somebody mentioned just a few minutes ago, when is Tom not teaching us, and how is he not teaching us? It's like it's just always there, and I carried that with me, and when I had healing patients, and I would use that as an inspiration to go and check on them and how they're doing, not to see if they're about to get happy time or not, but just to check on a patient, and it became that much more real as an ability to. He made it real. I didn't really ask him to, and it was just out of the kindness of his heart that he made this a real thing to me, not just something that I was taught and it's like, oh, that'd be cool someday, but like, here I am, the victim of 100 phone calls before it finally got to me that yes, this is absolutely real. There's no more coincidences. There's just so that's where he left us. We're all I can feel him around all the time now, just like then, except I can't call him and ask him to leave me alone. you know, there's no more going to sitting on his porch with him and him smoking a cigarette and not talking to me. Fun things like that one. Like he'd call me to come over and then we would not talk for an hour. Okay, thank you. I don't mind sitting there watching the birds and the wild turkeys come by. It was a treat for me too. But, so I'm probably rambling. Everybody, a lot of people asked me, what kind of questions did you ask Tom? And I thought, you must have great opportunities to ask him about this and that. And I honestly did not get a chance to ask him that many questions. When I was face to face with them, they just didn't seem important anymore. It was always that. It goes back to my standard class, and near the end of the week, he had us out there tracking mice. And after we came back, he said, "All right, if anybody has any questions, you can come up and ask me." And he sat there behind the desk in the barn, and he was like, "Okay, just questions." And people were coming up asking questions. What's the speed of a swallow carrying a coconut across the Atlantic? Or weird questions. And I had found something in the grass that looked like something that an owl had spit up, but it wasn't quite exactly like an owl. So I brought it up to him, and I'm like, "Tom, I don't know, is this like from an owl's or what? Where can I find some more?" And he's like, "Would you want grandfather's explanation, or you want to know what I would say?" I'm like, "Oh, gee, Tom, thank you. I'd like to hear what both of them would be, if you don't mind." And he's like, "If it was me, I would tell you that you're too fucking lazy to find out for yourself." Oh shit. Well, all right, all right. And I said, "Grandfathers, like this hope that that his teacher was nicer than him." And he says, "Grandfather wouldn't have been as polite." Goes back to smoking. And just sort of looked through and past me. I knew, all right, that's enough. So I was terrified to ask him questions about anything ever afterwards, because I knew the answer was always, you're just not trying hard enough on your own. You need to do more. You need to research it more. You need to have some more patience. Just great. It's a mystery is a wonderful thing to hold on to. You don't need the answer right away. You can keep it. You can work on it. And feel like I'm rambling. Anyway, thank you. We all miss him. He's still there. He graduated into spirit, and he can haunt us all in our dreams and make sure that we're trying harder, working harder, trying to live the vision that we all were gifted with when we were born. He's for me anyway. He's there saying you're fucking lazy. So anyway, good luck everyone. I hope that you don't get those curse words too.
Aw.
Aw. Hey, I'm gonna turn off the camera and Tom's gonna call.
That was brilliant, Charlie. Thank you. Yeah, you did really have to be careful if you're going to ask Tom a question. Um, it was the last time I asked Tom a question once that I hadn't actually researched. I think it was 2017. We were at the old Cracker Studio in Barnegat, and there was a trumpet creeper vine growing outside. And, I didn't really know that plant very well, and I was just feeling excited about finding it. And without thinking, I said something like, "Hey, Tom, you know anything about this plant?" And he looked at me, and as soon as he looked at me, I'm like, "Oops." Because he's like, "Dave, you know better than to ask me something like that." Like, "Oh, yeah. Yeah." So I did research it for a good long time. He never did talk to me about it again. Yeah. It's it's a good reminder, like how many times do you get exposed to things in life or have questions about things, but you keep them on sort of a superficial level. That was one thing Tom taught all of us, keep that sacred question in your heart. In fact, Tom called the sacred question one of the living prayers. It's not just something you say once in a while, you think about once in a while. It's something that is part of your everyday life, right? Um, Nancy, I had a short video I wanted to play. Did you want to say something before that or after?
It's just real quick, Dave, about the questions, and Charlie and mentioned. I know folks because we spent a lot of time with Tom at the onlines in the doghouse. I lived with him several different times. I perhaps in all those years maybe asked him half a dozen questions. Because every time I wanted to ask a question, I was like, no, he gave me the tools to figure this out. And I would pull back. Once there was a question about darkness, which he did answer. And the other time it was about a bird that I kept hearing flying over camp. And I thought, no, he's not going to tell me, so I'll coyote it. And I'm like, God, I saw this bird and it's really big. And it kind of looks like a swan, but it like wheezes when it flies. And he launched into a whole story about that bird. It was like a whistling swan or something. And he put that forth. And that was the only time. So folks, there wasn't a whole lot of secret stuff. And we used to remark in the online studio, we'd laugh and say, oh, if the people at home only realized all the crap we were talking about and laughing. And they're probably all thinking we're asking all these serious questions about life. And no. It was great. So thanks, Dave. That's all I wanted to add.
Well, and speaking of how Tom was in the studio, it was interesting seeing him, whether it was in the studio for the broadcast or out on a tracking case. I don't think I ever saw that guy tunnel vision in too much. He always had an awareness of everything going on around him, was always looking, is there something I can use here to teach? In the studio with a lot of us, and me in particular, oftentimes it was just awareness. Like, could he catch you sleeping, so to speak? And he would quite often do that with me right when I was absolutely busy. Computers are failing, cables aren't working. Um, it was just, it was pretty bad sometimes. But so this is a short little video clip um, to show you. Uh, he's always looking to see what your awareness is like, and he was always looking to see where the humor was in life. So I'm going to share a screen. Hold on a moment.
All right, you ready? What?
How did you get that?
Thank Charlie for that.
Oh, God.
Throw him under the bus. What's the other side say again?
You didn't expect that, did you?
That was good.
Yeah. Elizabeth, you had something to add there?
Okay, so that was great seeing that little clip of Tom, his mischievousness, and thanks Charlie for that mug for him. That was awesome. I just wanted to, there's been a lot of talk about asking Tom questions, and because I live in Canada, I get to physical classes when I could, but I would really think, okay, maybe I'll have a time to talk to Tom and ask questions. So I would do the research and I'd make a list very concise. And I go to Tom and I'd say, I need to talk to you about a few things. Can you please let me know when it's a good time for you? Because there are better times than others, and Tom can be hard to read sometimes. So each class, he'd make time for me, and I'd go through my list of questions, and he would answer me. But there was this one time, it was at the Boy Scout camp. And I get up, and I'm heading to the bathroom as Tom's heading back towards the back of the room. And I swear to God, he thought I was going to ask him questions at that point because I'm just going to the bathroom. But there was like this little hallway. He sort of moved around and went to this little hallway so we wouldn't encounter each other. So I wouldn't have that opportunity to ask him questions. And I just found that hilarious. And it was like, really, Tom? No questions this time. None whatsoever. I just need to go to the bathroom. So I just wanted to share that little tidbit there.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah. John, are you out there yet?
I'm here.
What do you got to say?
First got to change my earbud. All right. Yeah, I was thinking about a time when we traveled to Pennsylvania to teach kind of a modified standard class for the Women's Outdoor Club. That was probably like 1979 or 1980. And we were staying in the same hotel room, and I had to get a shower and before dinner, and he says, yeah, don't lock the bathroom door. I might need to come in there and do some things before we go. Don't worry, I won't peek. I'm like, come on, Tom, I know better than to trust you while I'm in the shower. So he says, no, really, I won't do anything, So I said, all right. So then I look around the shower room and I'm like, okay, I'm taking all the cups and hiding them, right? So I don't know what he's got in mind, but I hid them away. And a moment later, he comes in, and I don't know what he's doing, but he says, it's all right, don't worry about it, So I'm taking a shower. He had filled the garbage can with cold water, and he dumped it over the top of the shower on me while I was in the middle of the shower. And this guy, he just never stopped doing that kind of stuff. Like, you just never, ever let your guard down. And I remember one morning, we'd been up pretty much till about 3 or 4 in the morning on just scout activities. And I was asleep in my sleeping bag, literally next to the medicine waters. We had just kind of rolled up there and just pulled our bags out and went to sleep on the ground. And it's probably about 2 degrees outside and it's just getting light. And he says, "Come on, we got to go." And I'm like, "No way," and I pulled my head deeper in the sleeping bag, right? And just trying to stay warm because it was so cold. He says, "Come on, we have to go." And I'm like, I'm not moving. I'm too cold. He says, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." So then he grabs the foot of my sleeping bag and does the old tablecloth trick. In one quick zip, I was lying on the cold ground outside my sleeping bag. He says, "Are you cold now?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm freezing. Fuck you, Tom. That sucks." And he says, "Fuck you." Picks me up over his head and throws me into the medicine waters. And I'm cursing out as I'm flying through the air. I hit the water. All of a sudden, I come out of the water and I am not cold. And I'm just laughing really hard. He says, "All right, let's go. Get dressed. Come on, we gotta go." So, this is the kind of stuff he was up to, especially when he was young and able to pick me up over his head and throw me like a log. But yeah, that was pretty something. But the one thing I did really want to share was, so many nice stories about how he taught us, right? I was sitting in the doghouse with him in 2022, and we were just kind of chatting, and he said to me, "You know what's funny, John?" I'm like, "What?" He said, "There's people that I bump into, and they call it a sit spot. So then I know that you taught them. And if they say sit area, then I know I taught them. But I can track these two, streams of people. And it's like we're now at this point where he's passed away. He called it the sit area, and let's call it that. But prior to that, when I was young and I had a sit area, he didn't have a name for it at the time. He didn't name it. He just made me get one. He told me it was a place to practice camping. So I started going there when I was 10, and I went there pretty much every day because he had promised me that he would take me fishing and catch American eels in this place in the Pine Barrens, which turned out to be not Dover Forge, but
All right,
Double
I gotta
Trouble.
go change this diaper real quick.
Yeah, good luck changing that diaper. And he promised he would take me there because I always wanted to catch American eels. And he said, "But I won't take you there until you practice camping," which was how he got me to go to my sit area. And I had to go there every day, and he would call me every night to make sure I was doing it. And he only had to do that for 3-4 weeks before I didn't need the encouragement. I actually wanted to go to my sit area, right? It was like in the beginning I would totally rebelled against it, but it makes me think of something I heard recently in one of the classes that if Tom had asked grandfather if he could only teach one thing to a person, what would it be? And it would be the sit area. And I completely underline that. It's been 53 years since this, maybe 54 years now since this story took place where he got me going there. And he had me go every day. He'd call me every night and he'd ask me a question or two about my experience. And every day the question would be in areas that he hadn't asked questions about before. So I always thought, okay, he's going to ask me that question again. So I go out the next day and look around and pay attention to make sure I can answer that question. But then the next night he'd be asking me about what I heard, and I didn't hear anything because I was too busy looking. And when I was about 13 years old, if you had asked me anything about my sit area from the 3 years prior, I wouldn't really remember anything. And there was a day when I walked back from my fishing hole back to my house. And when I got there, he called me and he asked me, what did I do? And then I told him, I was fishing. How many fish did you catch? I told him. He said, which way did you come back home? And the weirdest thing happened. I couldn't remember which way I came home. There was like 3 or 4 trails I could have taken, and I always tried to take different ones, but I could not remember what trail I took. And he said to me, you can't remember? I'm like, no. He's like, what does that mean? Were you even really there? Think about that. And then he hung up. That question haunted me for weeks. And it made me forever always pay attention consciously to where I was so that I would never be caught not remembering again. Another time, I was stepping out of the forest after my sit, and I was walking home, and it was twilight. And he called me and he said, where did you come out of the forest at twilight? I said, yeah. He said, because he knew I like to go fishing and then go to my sit area and then come home. He said, when you stepped out onto the cul-de-sac, what did you hear? And I said, I didn't hear anything. Really? And I said, yeah. He said, huh? He said, I'll tell you what, tomorrow night, try to time your trip home to step off at the same time that you stepped off this evening, and I'll call you tomorrow night. So I'm like, uh-oh. Next evening, I step down off that curb, same spot, and I stop and I listen. And there is the greatest cacophony of sparrow roosting calls coming from the hedge right next to me. There's 30, 40 of them, and they're just making a whole hell of a lot of noise. And again, he asked me, you told me last night you didn't hear a thing. Do you think that's the only time those sparrows have been in there? And I said, I don't know. He said, I want you after school tomorrow, go in there directly from the bus trip, crawl under those bushes, and I'm going to call you and ask you what you saw tomorrow night. So I go under there, and there is tons of sparrow crap piled on top of each other with feathers stuck underneath turds and everything else. It was like clear that those sparrows were there for weeks, not one night. And then he asked me that night, what does it mean that you stepped out of the forest the other night and then you told me you didn't hear anything? Again, were you even there? Right? So he's like haunting me with this idea. I started to listen so much harder, people, after that. And I started to notice those same sparrows around my sit area. And it was because I noticed that I heard the alarms of a bird that told me some animal was going by behind me that I couldn't see because it was in a thicket. I crawled into the thicket. I followed the direction of the bird alarms. I found kind of a faint raccoon trail on the leaf litter, and I followed it, and it led to a sand road. And on that sand road was a fresh red fox track. When I told him that story, he said to me, you've been going to your sit area now for, well, whatever. You've been going to that spot for however many years now, 3 years now? And I'm like, yeah, 3 years probably. He said, let's just call it 1,000 times. Maybe that was 1,000 hours. And I said, fair. He said, let me ask you something. You told me that when you got on that animal trail and started crawling down it, there were spider webs on either side of it, but it was perfectly clear without spider webs on it, right? And I said, yeah. He says, what does that mean? I said, well, the trail's being used by something every day. He said, right. Do you think that's the first time that that fox has moved past you when you're at your sit area? And I said, probably not. Are you going to let that fox get the better of you again, John? If I was you, I would get the better of that fox, okay? Challenge a 13-year-old boy with a competitive spirit like that. What I did after that was I unceasingly listened to bird language, unceasingly listened. I never wanted to be caught like that again. Not just by the fox, but by Tom, the coyote, the older brother of the fox. And I'm telling you right now, by the time I was 17 or 18 years old, I had the sacred silence all the time and did not realize that the people around me didn't even know what it was. That's a huge freaking gift. That has helped me in my whole life in so many ways that I can't even begin to tell you. He never once mentioned it. He never once, when I was a boy, mentioned the sacred silence. He never mentioned it. Yet he brought me there. Or I should say, he taught me to pay attention to the birds, or pay attention to the fox that's teaching me to pay attention to the birds. And what a huge gift that is, right? My whole life is what it is because of that man, and I am so thankful and indebted to him. And the biggest feeling of debt that I have is to do that for others forward, to make sure that others get the benefit of this. And I hope you all feel the same, and I can feel that in you. But yeah, I just want to thank everybody who has shared this day. It's been so meaningful and wonderful to laugh and cry. We miss you, Tom, and thanks for visiting your son as a hummingbird. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Those are good stories. Yeah, it does seem pretty important when we think about adapting to grief and getting beyond just the mourning. How many times did Tom stress the value of working with a purpose beyond self, right? Where it's not just your betterment or for your benefit, you're doing this for things outside of you. And maybe doing what you can to, I don't know, teach, just be a good person. These things help us adapt to that grief, because you're not wallowing in it, you're just doing something positive then. Now I think it'd be good to open it up just for anybody who wanted to comment. Just bear in mind there's a lot of people on here. 283. That's a lot of people. But keep it concise. But just raise your hand and we'll continue on through. And Ariana, you had your hand up, I think the very first hand. So thank you for being so patient. And let me ask you to unmute yourself.
There we go. Yeah, I apologize. You said elders, and I thought, yeah, I'm an elder, but I didn't realize it was the community. But it's been such an honor. Thank you for opening it up to people who haven't been, a close part of this community the last couple of decades. I took Tom's classes, and I met Tom in the 80s, and I had a really challenging spiritual mentor in my life at that point. And then I met Tom. I so was drawn to the Pine Barrens and Tom. He was him and my other mentor were the most amazing mentors in my life. And my life wouldn't have been what it is if it hadn't been for either of those mentors. And it was back in the 80s that I started. I kept going back and forth. I think I started there after John had left and Frank Sherwood was still there. And I'm out in Washington State. And, one of the things I always heard Tom say is get out there and teach. And his classes were so amazing to me. So, I eventually started teaching. I didn't start a big school, but I always taught to small groups. And I ended up with a career in the environment, working with kids in the summertime for like 30 years. And I always managed to get my curriculum. I get my Tom Brown teachings in there. I teach survival just on a basic class, but it's been such a large part of my life. I had a funny story or two real quick. I know there's a lot of people in line, but I loved this. So back in the day, I was so willful, right? I just would, in my teachings, whether it was Tom or my other teacher, I just put all myself into it. And so when it came to the debris huts, it was like, nope, I'm not cheating. I'm going out there. I'm just going to have my wool swan dry. It was, cold. It was frosting. It was icy. And I'm like, nope, I'm going to build this thing. And I, had all the lessons you get with debris huts. But what happened was I built my debris hut on a chigger nest. And Tom had the funnest time simply teasing me every time I got in a bathing suit, to walk the plank or any of his classes. Every time I was in a bathing suit, he would be teasing the heck out of me about all the bites on my on my legs. I must have had hundreds of bites. And so, that was just a really fun memory I had. And the other thing that was a fun memory is in the scout class. I got to be in one of his early scout class. I think it was like the second one. He'd just written the book and he gave us the proof. He hadn't even published the scout book yet. And we were going over, he invited us over to the house. And I remember he had this white carpet at his house. That it was one that was right there. I don't know the East too well. I don't know the area. I don't remember the area. It was on the beach, sort of. And he invites us in there, and there's this white carpet. And I'm like, I think your wife might have a fit if we're all walking in there in our muddy boots. He's just giving me this look like, forget about it. And I mean, he was a character, and I loved his coyote teachings. I learned so much from him. And I do feel his important message that comes through, and it comes through now. Look at all of you. Look at all of you in this community. I ended up staying in Washington. I was gonna go over to volunteer and live on the land. And in that moment, I got married and ended up staying in Washington State and then did my own thing. But all of you here in this audience, is so precious to see you all here and all the rich knowledge you have. It's so awesome. I mean, I can see Tom just, yeah, go people, take it, and you're going to continue the school, and it's so freaking exciting. And each one of you is such a contributor. I mean, he lives in you, and I know you know that, but he does. He lives in you, and I feel like there's a celebration. I know there's mourning and that needs to happen, but there's also such a celebration for each one of you, and it carries on. And I feel him in the ethers, looking down, and he can do so much in the ethers. He's continually doing that. That man was such a worker, I mean, his will was awesome. I remember him working when he had a migraine, and it wasn't, we sat and we chatted. It was away from the class, and I used to have migraines. I used to just overdo, get migraines, and he had this splitting migraine. He's like, oh, and he said, I said, Tom, just take a minute, take a minute, take a breath, just, it's okay, just, and he's like, nope, look, I'm gonna finish this day. I'm gonna finish what I'm doing, and I'm like, just beautiful. Those were my quick stories. I don't want to take up any more time. Blessings to you all.
Thanks, Ariana. That was good.
Yeah.
Vin, I think you were next. Vin's been around for a long time. Good to see him here. And are you at work or are you off work today?
Off work. Yeah, I took my standard in 83, my first philosophy in 85, and I took a vision quest sometime around 83, 84. And it was when Tom was still giving them. And he used to do this thing when he gave Vision Quest, where he walked into your quest area day 2 or 3, and he counseled you. And I've never heard of anyone else doing that before or since. But it's just an example of what a maddening version of coyote teaching could be. Because he walks into my quest area, and when I quest, I'm not dancing too much usually. I'm not up and dancing like crazy, and I'm usually just laying on the ground, and I just get overwhelmed by things. And he walks in. He's a tracker. He could see it. He's looking at the ground, and he tells me this story. The coyote looks down and sees 2 people questing, and one person is dancing for his vision, and the other is just laying on the ground. So the coyote says, for the man who's dancing for his vision, I'll give him his vision. For the man who's laying on the ground, for his trouble, I'll give him a greater understanding. So he asked me if I need anything. I said, no. And he leaves. It must have took me 25 years to finally realize that a greater understanding is an excellent vision. But what a way to keep you humble for decades. So that's just, I think some of the things he told us will be coyote teaching us for the rest of our lives, So that's my story.
Thanks, Vin. That's good. Jonathan, I think you were next. You got your mic on there. Try that now.
Hi, everyone. I'm relatively new, but I wanted to share a brief story. It was 2012. I was at a friend's house. I was actually getting therapy, and this therapist had a bookshelf filled with books. And I look at this one book, and the title of it, it feels like it slaps me in the face. I've never had this experience before. And it was The Vision by Tom Brown Jr. And, you know, one of my biggest regrets is I didn't get to the tracker school sooner. But fast forward, it's now the pandemic, new dad, 2 young kids, living in New York City, living a nightmare, so challenging. And I just feel called. And I'm like, I got to get there. I've been resisting it too long. And so my daughter and I, it's our first father-daughter only trip. And I'm like, feeling a little crazy. I put the car seat in the passenger seat. I'm like, Emma, you're riding up front. Let's go. We're doing this. And we get into the Pine Barrens and everyone's wearing masks. And it's like, you know, intense for both of us. And man, I just want to leave a blessing for every single person on this call. May we all leave tracks that can inspire someone that hasn't even met us and help heal their families, because it helped me and it helped me heal my family. And man, I want to live like that. I want to live that passion. I want to follow those tracks. And that's my blessing for all of you. And now it's shaped. Lolly, come say hello. You want to say hi? No? It's helped heal my family, and we just continue to follow those tracks. And this is Lolly, and he's saying hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here and for this opportunity.
That's good to hear, Jonathan. Thank you so much for sharing that. Strong. Yeah. Rick, or no, I'm sorry, Melina. Am I saying that right? I'm sorry.
Good morning, Milena. Thank you.
Melina.
That's a beautiful story, Jonathan. I have a similar one. I never actually was able to go to the school. I live in California. I first read the book, Tom's book, in the 80s. My son was 4 years old, and there was a fire, and he got Bell's palsy. My son was 3 or 4 at the time. And I had just read the book and loved it. I love being out in nature, and I felt like it was really important for my son's healing. And so every night I would read him something from the book. And he started to, because the message was about listening and being quiet, and the amazing, you know, nature and the body, all of that, that was a healing for my son. And I'm just profoundly grateful. And I followed Tom. You know, there wasn't any web, whatever, internet, all of those things, but I did write him a note, and he wrote me. I didn't keep the note, but he did write back when I told him how grateful I was for his story and for who he is and who he was, you know, during that time.
Thanks, Melina. Rick, are you still out there? Might be there. Maybe we'll come back to Rick here in a moment. But Rana, I saw you had your hand up there.
Yes. There's only one time I really had one-on-one with Tom, but the reason, I mean, funny reason how I found Tracker School. First, at the time, I was trying to apply for the show Survivor, which when I took my first class, I discovered he hates. And I was at the time also working 2 jobs 7 days a week, and I was working on the weekends at this bookstore, used bookstore. And my areas to maintain were science fiction and nature, anything nature, hiking, all that. So one weekend, I come into the store, and there's this book that's out of place. And it's Tom Brown Jr.'s How to Live or Survive in the Wilderness. And I'm like, interesting. And I put it back. The following weekend, it was in a completely different location in the store, and I had to put it back. It happened a third time, and I thought, this is my book. So I set it aside to buy. And then figuring I needed to know how to survive if I'm going to be on this Survivor show. And then I started reading the book, and everything made sense until it came to bow drill. I'm like, I can't make heads or tails of this. And I looked it up, discovered there's classes in Boulder Creek, and signed up for the 2010 standard class in April of 2010. So I signed up for one reason. I went for a completely different reason. 6 weeks before class, my husband, who had congestive heart failure, had just had a failed stent procedure. It did not work. And we were told that my husband had months to live. I was tempted not to go to class. And my husband insisted, because I was being too motherly. I was just hovering over him, and he needed a break. And he said, no, you are going. And I said, okay. And my therapist reminded me that I could go for a different reason. And the reason I went was to learn how to be with my husband and help him transition. I learned a lot at this class. It was pouring rain. I was completely unprepared. All my camping gear was ruined from being in the garage for 10 years without coming out with triple-digit heat. So I ended up coming with bins and duffel bags and a huge family-sized tent. And I was very grateful for the people that helped me set up my tent. A lot of lessons, including how to care for myself. And for the first time in that class, I heard the spirits. Never heard spirits before. And the one time Tom was teaching me, I'd already been crying like most of the week, but it was when he was showing us the tracks, the tiny tracks. And he actually took me and showed me how to see the mouse tracks going up the trees and the ant tracks. I had never seen that before. And I was in awe. I was amazed. I could actually see them. And even today, I can look at a tree and say, that's an ant track. And it was an amazing time. And there's more that can go with that story, but that's for another day. Thank you.
Thanks, Ronna. You still track mice on trees, right? Oh, sorry. There you go. Try that.
Thank you. Yes, mice, squirrels, anything else that I happen to notice on the trees. Right now my trees are in shock because insurance company has decided I have to clear up everything and trim things, and yeah.
Right on. Rick Berry. What are you doing
Yeah.
there?
Hey, I'm here. I couldn't find the little button. Can you hear me, Dave? Yeah. Okay. Hey, thanks. Oh, hey, yeah. Thanks, Dave, for putting this together, and thanks, Raina. That was a beautiful story. Yeah, I was actually thought this was like a little later today, so I got here a little late. But yeah, I love this whole theme of I've never heard of that, opening the windows. Beautiful. Well, hey, I wanted just to share just a couple little stories. And when I came to the tracker school, it was at the old farm. Now it was the second farm, I guess, but it was the one that, they were there so long with the red barn. In '86 I went. So it was a few years ago. I was a teenager, and I never forget at the end, it was, well, of course it was an amazing week. And I went with a friend of mine, And I just recently figured out that Nancy Klein was there. We got picked up by Bear, at the airport. I'm in his old pickup in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Anyways, we ended up, at the class. Basically, Tom he runs this sweat lodge right at the end. And he says, well, the class is over, but if you want to come to this sweat lodge, you're welcome. And it was like Sunday, like the last thing we did. And so we go into this sweat lodge, and I'd never been to one. I was 15 years old, and, it was covered with like debris outside the barn. And I remember we were in there, and I thought, man, we're going to die. This is so hot, this whole thing. And I don't remember all of it, but I remember Tom in there, and he was, he started speaking in some other language. It was like a blessing from Stalking Wolf. And I remember he said something as we were leaving, and he said, well, you'll never be alone. The elders are watching you. And I was like, oh my, what's he talking about? And so that was, then he left the sweat, and he just disappeared. He was gone. And we left. I left my tracker class that day. And I remember we went to, on the way to the airport, we went to some, restaurant, and we had our knives on. We're like, we got to take our knives off, before we go eat. But anyway, I remember getting to the airport, and there was this small airport, right? And there's the same guy. And I remember I told him I was going to the tracker school, and he remembered me, and we were getting on the plane. It was like the old school, you walk out, and as a ramp, you walk on, and and the guy says, hey, did you survive? And I was like, this guy remembers me. And I'm like, yeah, I did, And I was, like I said, I was young, 15. I remember getting on the plane and just feeling like this feeling came over me of just like, oh, I can let a lot of this go. Whatever that was, of people thinking of how I'm going to act or be or all this stuff. So it was like the peer pressure and things like that. So it sort of disappeared. But I remember I got home. And this is the thing that, we're talking about things that sort of keep coming to you. And it's almost like, is Tom haunting me? And because I would be walking around, and I'd stop, and I'd be like, someone's watching. And I'd say, am I fox walking? And am I in wide angle vision? And it would happen to me all the time. And I thought Tom's watching me, or Stalking was watching me. And it really got me. And it got me so well that I really thought these things are watching me. And whether it was true or not, it really worked. And I thought this was later on, and to this day, I'm like, man, that really was a coyote for me, because it kept reminding me all the time to be aware, am I fox walking? Am I in wide angle vision? And, I really do think that they are watching. They're watching us all the time. So that was just a little story about when I was young, and then I came to the tracker, and it really changed how I thought, my awareness. And I mean, that's part of the reason why I teach children now and kids, because it's get them when they're younger. I think it's a lot easier. And then the other little story is about medicine waters. And it was this really fun afternoon. I know Tom was camping in the camp. He brought his family in, and I remember River and Cody were kind of young, and they had this. Tom put a tent right in the middle of camp, and I remember the whippoorwill came over and woke him up really early. So I remember we went out. We had to go. We said, well, hey Tom, we'll go get some coffee for you at Wawa. And if you ever gotten coffee for Tom, that he really likes it's half cream and half Wawa coffee. So, and the water was so low in camp that we just, hey, I'll meet you at the medicine waters. So it was Mark Tollefson and me. He was back, and we went out to the Wawa, and then okay, we'll meet him back out at the medicine waters, and we get out there, and man, we had an adventure. And I remember here's the way Tom, he told us a story about the shark tooth, and we're like, no way, this is where it all went down with old man Albert and Stalking Wolf, like making fun of Tom. This whole story, how they planted this huge shark tooth and then they found it. And it's like, oh, you missed it. And there's this whole story going on, right? And so Tom, and I remember it was me and Billy McConnell too. He was there, and he tells us his story, and we're like, oh, to be a true child of the pines, you got to find a shark tooth, right? And so we're like, oh, he really had us. And Tom's down in the creek, looking around, and he's down there, and we're following him, and I remember we're walking down the creek, and all of a sudden it's like, well, yeah. Oh, sorry. All of a sudden, it was like Tom was right behind me, and it was like something grabbed me right in the butt, and he was like laughing so hard because I thought it was a snapping turtle, because there was like snapping turtle area down there in the creek. And so, anyways, we ended up down in the Medicine Waters for like a bunch of hours, and Tom's down there. And he's laughing, and he's still in the water, and the water is so cold by then that it's like the Medicine Waters. It's cold, and he's still down there. And I remember he reaches up in the air like this, and he's like, "Hey, Billy, Billy!" And Billy thinks he found a shark tooth, and of course Billy runs down just like, "Oh my God, he found a shark tooth!" And then Tom, of course, it's like a piece of bark, and he throws it, and he starts laughing, and he's laughing and laughing so hard because he's just a joker like that. He was always like that. And after that, I remember Billy and I, we were caretakers then, and I remember after that we were always like looking for a shark tooth, like, because it was like, oh, I want to be a true child of the pines. And so to this day, it's still this thing of where's the shark tooth in the Pine Barrens. Well, anyways, it's really good to see everybody here. And yeah, Dave, my battery's starting to go, but I just wanted to share a couple stories, and thank you so much, everybody. Okay, we'll see you.
Hey, thanks, Rick. Well, where are you calling from there? What is that background?
Oh, it's in California.
Okay.
Got some manzanitas. Oh yeah, beautiful day out here.
Nice. Well, thanks. Appreciate it, Rick. Michael, it looks like you're not getting beaten up by any small humans anymore.
That adorable small human is one of my grandsons. One of the reasons I get out of bed in the morning. All right, my sharing. I found this school by going to Blockbuster one day and renting that movie with Tommy Lee Jones and Benicio del Toro. What was the name of that thing? Well, anyway, I watched the extras at the end of the movie. And I had the same experience at the end of watching those extras that I do in finding my martial arts instructors. I saw that and I said, that's where I need to be. And promptly went hunting how to find the school. And oh my gosh, there was a backlog on classes I had to wait. So I've only been a student since about 2007. And I'd like to say that's a long time, but looking at some of the experience in the room here, I'm still a kid by comparison. The lessons from this school have been absolutely profound for me. My original martial arts instructor 38 years ago, he knew how to draw on the punk kid in me and pull me in the direction I wanted to go, get me to volunteer for all the abuse I could volunteer for. And as I think back of the scout class, we never really got a complete lesson in anything. We got just enough of a lesson that we could thoroughly fall on our face and feel like an absolute fool, which, like my original martial arts instructor, caused me to obsess over the lessons. And every few months I wake up and go, oh my gosh, how did I miss that lesson? Just learning how to fit into places that you don't think you should be, do things you don't think you should do. And as a martial artist, I practice a lot of these things like forms. So, by the way, the Phil 2 class that's still on YouTube. I need to find out from you if I can still log in because I need to review it probably my 4th time now at some point, just because I like to review after I practiced for a while. But these lessons, the wide angle vision, the spiritual stuff, there have been more than a few occasions where it has saved my life. Getting off the freeway one day and I changed lanes to go into a separate lane on the ramp to get off. And a little boy started screaming in my head, "Look out." And I moved to the far, far left. I mean, I was up against the mirror of the next car over. And someone comes flying up off the ramp, slam on their brakes, and they were about, this far off of my right-hand side. And if I'd stayed in the middle of the lane, they'd have plowed into me at about 45 miles an hour. And I have a lot of instances where those types of lessons happen. But after I took my standard class, backing up a bit, that was when I discovered that my martial arts instructor here in Las Vegas was close friends from going to the Sundance with Tom Frank. And he says, "You took the standard class." I said, "Yeah." And he explained who he was and what he did. And he says, "You're taking Phil next." "I want to take the physical classes." "No, you're taking philosophy next." Well, I get online and I go to take my next physical class. And what did I sign up for? Yeah, of course, philosophy. And I don't regret a minute of that. It is such a perfect blend for everything we do. Now, we're dealing with the grief of things. I lost my original karate instructor. I lost my martial arts instructor here. And you think losing family members is painful. Losing mentors, teachers who've been with you for a very long time digs deep, deep into your soul. And the only thing I can say to that through experience now is having lost people who were so much a part of who I am is for the next 3 to 6 months, I was absolute landfill, just garbage. But on the other side of that, not that the pain has ever really completely left me for my losses, is this little thing inside of you triggers. You wake up and go, "Oh shit," pardon my language. If I don't study this stuff properly, I can't just pick up the phone and call them anymore. I can't just send an email. They're not there. And I found once the soul gouging pain goes away, you throw yourself into the training. And in each instance that has ever happened to me, I find that once that I get past that grief period, for the next 18 to 24 months, I experience enough growth that it represents a level of growth comparable to the prior 10 years. So what I would call on all of you to do is experience all of your grief. It's real. This person was a part of you, is a part of you. They aren't just some other entity. They're a piece of who you are. Draw on that piece of them that is who you are and pull out everything they offered you, and you will discover things about yourself you didn't know were there. Lessons you never thought they taught you, but they were coyote taught to you. They were sitting there in the background the whole time. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Aaron, one of my favorite storytellers, how are you doing out there?
No pressure, right?
Oh yeah, no
So,
pressure. You're fine.
it's hard to think which story. And so I'll try to keep it to a couple small ones. I, like other people, had read all of his books. I heard about him through a Swami in a yoga ranch, and I was like, I have to take classes from this person. Anyway, I get to the standard, and he is not the person I read about in the book. He's a cranky old man, and he reminded me of a drill sergeant, and I was so frustrated and so annoyed. And now that he's up there, he's probably laughing, because in my standard book, I'd be like, who the heck does this guy think he is? What
a nutcase. Why am I paying to take this class? But at one point, I went out, and at the time I had been living in New York City, and it had been a long time since I was connected in nature. And I saw a glowworm, and I thought I was seeing magic. I mean, it was lighting up and lighting down and up and down, and I was so excited. And I came back with all this excitement, and I don't think I asked him a question, but I might have asked him, because my thought was, and I did say it out loud, I wonder what a glowworm looks like. Took a hit off the cigarette. You got a flashlight? And at that moment I went, oh, this is a different style of teaching. I wasn't even asking a question. But to me, it's one of my favorite memories of him because it didn't dawn on me to have a flashlight. We're learning how to survive in the dark. I hadn't taken the fire section of the class yet. Anyway, so that's that. How to condense this story. I was in a philosophy class and we had to go out and touch the trees and feel the energy. And I was one of the people who could also see the energy. But because he kept talking about feeling it first and most people don't see it, I thought I was doing something wrong. So I asked Malcolm a question about this, and then I asked Kevin, and they're both like, you need to talk to Tom and ask him in the class. And I thought, okay, if they say I should ask him, it's an important question, I will. And I raised my hand and I asked Tom. And my question was, how do I know if what I'm seeing is energy or something that I hypothetically might have taken in the 70s and I'm having a flashback? And the class visibly went, oh! And Tom went, that is a good question. And I went, oh, okay. And then he answered it, and I won't go into the answer, but Malcolm and Kevin were right to ask him and not be embarrassed to ask a question that you thought was important. One of my favorite stories of Tom, and I'm cutting these really short, is I was he used to run these intensives with 10 people, and it was a little intimidating. And I was in one called Philosophy of Survival. There were only 4 of us. And then the next week was a scout intensive, and he knew I was coming to the class because he asked me about it. I show up at the class, and I get out of the vehicle, and he looks at me and he goes, what are you doing here? This is a scout class. Do you know that this is a scout class? This is an intense scout class. Why in the heck are you here? I guess I'm a little bit of a smartass from living in New York City. And I looked at him and I said, we talked about this last week. And if you didn't want me here, why did you take my money? And so he started laughing. And then he goes, well, let me take your bags. Uncle Tommy has to take your bags. And I'm like, oh my God, he's going to touch my stuff. By then I knew that him touching stuff was just going to be a nightmare. And behind him, whittling, because he's always whittling, is Billy and Eddie and Kevin. And I don't know if Jorge was there or not. And they're chuckling amongst themselves because it's like, whoa, she's under the target now. She's on the radar. And I'm trying to think of everything I can think of to get him to not know where my tent is. Anyway, so as that's over and I get my stuff in my tent, I see my friend, the only other female in this group, and I go way up past the Bobs. And I said, where's your truck? And she said, back at camp. And I said, we need to walk out and get your truck. We need to pack my stuff up and we need to get me the heck out of here. I'm not taking this class. I need to disappear. And she just said, Erin, can you calm down a bit? You really wanted to come here. You've been talking about this for months. Why don't you put your swimsuit on and go in the swim area? So I put my swimsuit on and I head towards the swim area and I hear laughter and I know that laughter. And I'm like, no, he's not in the swim area. He wouldn't be hanging out with students. And then I hear Billy's laughter. And then I know it's Tom's. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't go in the swim area now. This place is not safe for me. So I go across that rickety little skinny bridge and I realize they are all in that mud thing that's off to the left, and they are covered in mud, and they're laughing and they're squealing like little young kids. And as I walk by, Tom looks me in the eye, only he's looking up because I'm standing up. And I realize he's going to grab me and throw me in the mud. And in my head, I said, "You don't have enough insurance to do that." And his eyes opened and he backed like I had hit him. And then he went back to squealing and laughing. Now, you might all think that that's, well, anyway, so I mope over to the swim area and I'm moping. And then all of a sudden it hits me. This is the Tom that I read about in the books. This is the Tom. He's older now, but he's running around like that little kid that had grandfather doing stuff. So I went over to the mud pit, got in the mud, and hung out with the rest of the people. To me, one last thing which wasn't embarrassing was another, it might have been that same week, or it could have been another intensive. He sent everybody out to Intervision, look for the perfect stick, a throwing stick, and it had to have, we were going to carve a point on it and everything. And he's like, it has to be this big and that wide. And he holds up a stick and he goes, "This is the perfect stick." And he puts it back down on his sacred desk that you don't touch. And I start walking out of that area and I look at him and I go, "If that's the perfect stick, can I just have that stick?" And he just goes, thinking like a scout, "Thank you." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I didn't think he was going to say yes. I thought he was going to be snarky with me. But anyway, he was always full of surprises. And so thank you so much for letting me share those stories.
Right on, Aaron. It's always fun. I actually think T3 had a moment here. Tommy, are you available right now?
Roger. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, sounds good.
Hi, everybody. So, it's good to see so many familiar faces. Some of you may not know me, but I left my position as head instructor and director at Tracker in '09, I think, the fall of '09. And, at the time it was one of the hardest things I had to do. But I realized that in order to become my own, be responsible for my own face, as Bob Dylan said, find my own stories. It was a path I had to take. And, as someone who's been a nature educator now for 26 years, continuing to this day, I'm just still to this day unpacking lessons that he, taught me as a child all the way up until the day I left. And a few things I want to share is one way he would always upset me if I did something that ticked him off when I was a little kid is he would say, I remember one time I pounded a hatchet into a stump really deeply for no reason. And he was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, I'm just playing with the hatchet. He's like, "You're acting like a city boy." And I'd be like, "No, Dad, I'm not a city boy. I'm not a city boy." And yeah, so that one always stuck with me. And the other one, and that is still one of my favorites, is we were surfing together one time and just complaining about how I needed a new surfboard, need a new surfboard, need a new surfboard. And he grabs me and he holds me underwater until I'm just about drowned. And he lifts me back up and he goes, "Now, did you need or did you want that breath?" And I was like, "I needed it." He goes, "Now you know the difference between needs and wants, son." And that's another lesson that stuck with me as I, continue to now travel the country. I'm currently at my brunkle, John Young's house, sitting not far from where he is probably, pursuing my version of the vision, which is bringing the skills to everybody. And I also wanted to mention, as I mentioned in chat, I have tons of Tracker memorabilia that I'm going to start digitizing as soon as I'm able and make available to all of the tracker family, and then also archiving it so it stays safe and protected. But I want to thank you all so much for being part of my chosen family and my worldwide family, supporting me as I've gone through my own personal struggles and, continue to as of late. Um, the profound sense of loss is being replaced with knowing that he is now omnipresent, and he is with me all the time. And in fact, just before I begrudgingly woke up a little bit earlier than my rest needing body had to, this he was like, "Get off your ass, son. Get your computer fired up. It's time for the meeting," and I was up and ready to go. So, thank you all so much. Some of you I consider dear friends. Some of you I've never met, but you're always family to me. And I'm going to be doing a documentary about my father, starting here soon. Well, I've already started it. So as I travel across the country, I'll be announcing through my website where I'll be. And if you want to be interviewed for the documentary on how his teachings have changed your life, um, just send me an email through my website, which David can provide or I'll put up in chat. Yeah, and I'll stop by and set up my tent, my roof tent, and my car known as Rolling Turtle in your driveway for a few days, and we'll talk and hang out. And yeah, I hope to attempt to tell the story of a man who has directly and or indirectly affected millions of lives. I don't think he ever really truly understood how many people's lives he's changed for the better in this world. So thank you all for being my family. And if I can ever do anything for any of you within, my capabilities, don't hesitate to reach out to me because, you know, I love to communicate with y'all. So that's all I got. Thank you and blessings to you all so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Tommy.
I've spoken.
Looking forward to seeing Rolling Turtle on the road.
Yeah, I'm trying.
That's a
I just got my insurance back yesterday, so that's good. But yeah.
well, that's a lot of modifications you're doing on it too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost there. So close.
Right on.
Which I have to talk to you about later, by the way. So
Uh-oh.
no, in a good way. No,
Okay.
I need some advice. So some media advice.
Right on. We are getting close to the end, so I think we'll just finish out with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people that have their hands up, and that means that we will end fittingly enough with Shore. So let's go to Sherry. How you doing?
That mute button that got me.
There you go.
I'm fine, and I am very glad to know that there'll be hopefully a documentary coming out because there's all kinds of rumors sometimes that aren't true, and so that would be great. I wrote a little chat in there. I never personally met Tom. I did take a class online, and the thing I remember the most from it, he sent us outside to look at nature, just feel it. It was an awareness, a class having to do with awareness. And so I was out there and I thought, is this class for real? This guy is having me go out for like 15, 20 minutes and just stand here. And so after a while, it was a beautiful night and it was warm. And all of a sudden, I was just ready to come back in, and this huge wave of air, it was kind of warm, and fluttering of wings went skidded right over my head. And I thought, okay, this guy could be for real. It was an owl, I think. But from that's not the first time I was aware kind of what the potential might be. His books are wonderful. And then about a month before he passed away, I had this terrible urge to read his books. I didn't know any, I hadn't connected with anything for a while, but I started reading all his books and the one on spirituality. And so that was pretty intense. And then I wrote a letter out of the blue. And it turned out it was after he passed away, but I had no idea about any, of him leaving this world and going into the next. So mostly I want to thank everyone here because you guys are wonderful. And I'm learning. You read these chats that are really weird about Tom, and just being here listening to all your stories tells me so much about him. And I'm so appreciative because I feel like somehow I have met him. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry. It's funny. Tom knew that some of the stuff that he would say was kind of out there, right? And I was just reviewing one of those classes where, and I think Jorge was there at this too. Tom gets done laying down just some totally crazy exercise and then sends the class out. Before they've left, he like calls over to Jorge. He's like, Jorge, make sure you got the big special batch of Kool-Aid ready.
Oh, that's funny. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Patrick, how you doing out there?
Sorry, had to unmute. Boy, I tell you, I'm glad we got the invite, and I'm glad to see all these people, from the past. Tommy is how we know him because he was a little shit riding his four-wheeler around the Pine Barrens when we were out there. We started in '93 or '93. Yeah. And so we've been going to the tracker school for quite a while. It was good to see Jorge. John Young is one of my heroes. And I have to say, I'm thankful that even at this, John's teaching us. He's reminding us how to act, what to listen to, all that stuff. I have just a couple of stories that relate to Tom. Annette and I we had two small children when we started. And so we would take turns going out to the physical classes. And one time, I think it was Annette got back from advanced standard, and we were so excited comparing our notes to each other in the kitchen. Our young son, who's probably 2 or 3 or something like that,
3 and 4,
was sitting at the table. He was supposed to be eating breakfast, and we were just immersed in talking about a figure 4 trap and how all the intricacies of a figure 4 trap, and we're discussing it and stuff. And I turned around, and my son is trying to build a figure 4 on the table
with
his cereal box and with his spoon and stuff. And it made me realize just how far-reaching Tom's teachings are. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I wouldn't have even thought he could really understand what we were talking about, but there's magic behind the stuff that Tom taught. When I went to standard class, it was at the farm, and I was so excited. I had been reading Tom's books for a couple years beforehand, and finally got to go out to the class. And he one of the first things he talks about is fox walking and doing the fox walking, and I couldn't go to sleep that night. So it was really late. I got out of my tent and I was practicing my fox walking. So I walked down the side of the barn towards the house and then down the road, really trying to concentrate on my fox walking. And I get around where you can see the back of the house and the back porch lights on. And Tom is out there just going crazy, lifting weights. I mean, it's as hard as you can go. He was lifting, playing it around, banging around with his weights. And I was like, wow, you know, he's doing a class and he's up this late at night doing this. And so I do my fox walking back to my tent. And in the morning, you know, you're part of the groups, or your fire making, or your breakfast group, whatever. And we were standing there in the cold, you know, saying, well, should we try to make the fire with a bow drill? And nobody really wanted to do anything. We were just standing there talking. Tom walks up. He's like, hey, how's everybody doing? You know, he's got his coffee and his cigarette or whatever. And he says, you know, last night I was working out, and somebody, and he looks right in my eyes, some idiot was stomping down the road, kicking up the gravel, and I was like, there is no way. He saw me. He's under a light. I'm off on the road in the dark. You know, I'm like, I was doing good at my fox walking. He couldn't have heard me. But it was amazing. It shocked me how he was aware of it, you know, and of course he was teasing. It's you know, it's just, I don't know. Do you have a story you want to tell real quick? It's just amazing. Our whole married life, Tom, has affected us. We've been married 38 years, and everything that we do, everything that we are, is based on the things that Tom taught us, and it's amazing.
It's
You
a
know,
gift.
it's a gift. I love it. The longer you went out, I mean, when we went out to the California Standard class to help, you know, he greeted us like we were old friends. And it's just, it really touches my heart, you know, and it's so good to be a part of this. That's all I have to say. Shuna.
Shuna.
Patrick and Annette, thank you for sharing. Good to see you guys again, too.
Yes, thank you, David, for everything you do. We really appreciate it.
You're awesome.
Don't let
I'm too shaky.
Oh, yeah, don't let Tom hear you say that. Hey, Mary Jane, calling in from the other side of the sea.
Hi, everybody. I also found Tracker Camp, as it were, through Tom's books. I was lent the Book of Grandfather when I was sick with dysentery in India. And I was reading it simultaneously with the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, and found so much in both books that I wanted to learn. My main regret is that I didn't straight away come over to Tracker Camp. I'd applied to do a PhD in parapsychology in Edinburgh, and I did that first. So I spent years researching intuition, and now I would much rather, I think, have gone over to learn all of the tracker skills, because it's you know, a group of people who are really actually doing many of the things that I was doing research on, but not actually practicing. So I did make it over for the family camp in 2017 and the philosophy one earlier this year. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity. And now might not be the time to ask this, but I'm going to anyway. Just any advice from anybody on how to continue learning more of this, because I'm not really at the stage of being able to pass on what I know. Certainly haven't mastered most of it. I'd still like to learn more. And I'd like to share a joke that Tom made when I was at the school. I was struck by how American money seemed to me extremely forgeable. It was just on paper and monochrome, whereas British money had gone through an enormous upgrade with holograms and see-through sections. And it's also waterproof, so it can survive accidentally going through the wash. And for some reason, I ended up speaking to Tom about this. I think I was asking him about the shop, what money it took, and I showed him this, and straight away he just said, "Oh, so you can really launder money." So, seeing as that's a joke only I heard, I thought I'd pass it on in case anyone else would like to hear it. And Nancy, If there's a chance, I'd like to ask you just a couple of things. If you were at the family camp in 2017, can I grab you for a little chat at the end, please? Oh, and Erin, you never said what Tom replied to your question. I'd love to know that as well. Anyway, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mary Jane. How's your son doing? Is he doing well?
He's doing fine, but he's playing a video game rather than listening to this. But Tom once read out his feedback in response to an exercise, which was just to, picture the thing that you really wanted to find and then wander and stumble across it. And he obviously went out looking for it on purpose, couldn't find it, then gave up, came to find me instead and found exactly what he was looking for. He typed that feedback on the, the online interactive Zoom thing while Tom was teaching, and Tom read his feedback out, and he was very, very delighted to have his feedback read out.
Yeah, I remember that. Also, thanks to all the folks in Australia that got up pretty early today to join us here. I was reading a couple of comments in the chat room. Actually, this is Jude had commented on how many lives, you never know how many people's lives you touch. And New Zealand, indeed. And sometimes it's just really small things that make a difference, and you never know. And Jude was here as a caretaker or intern, and before Jude left, I got this pretty cool little thing. There it is. No, not spectacular, but it just keeps hanging around my desk because it's a good reminder of good things. So, Jude, you probably didn't realize that this would be something that would hang out on my desk like that. And a box of crayons, because that's always useful. Thanks. Yeah, I see you there, Amanda. How you been?
Good. Good to
Good.
see you and everybody. Dave, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Just so touched by everybody's stories, and it's firing so many more, like when we share gratitude and then like all your gratitude, like, oh yeah, that, and oh yeah, that. And just two really quick stories that I wanted to share. About a month ago, my kiddo came down from Oregon and has been around these teachings, John and Tom, and since they were about 8, now turning 25, and kind of got into them, but then lost all interest, lives super urban, super machine all the time, super traffic. And we went out camping for like one night and we piled the car full of stuff. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is like everything Tom has dedicated his life to teaching us not to need, and like more stuff in the car for one night. And we go, and there's this beach, this beautiful beach, and we arrive at sunset, and we're walking along. We'll go to the beach before dinner, nobody on the beach. And I'm like just blissing out. There's a sunset and the ocean, the Pacific. We're in Northern California. I'm not really paying very much attention to anything. And Luca, my kiddo, goes, heron tracks. And I'm like, huh? And they found this amazing set of heron tracks. And I tried to do my little coyote mentoring and, well, are you sure? Whatever. And then we're walking along some more and they lose interest. And so we're just hanging out. And then I hear bear tracks on the beach. And I'm like, I had missed all of that. And then we're walking along and Luca says, heron. And so from a place of like seemingly zero interest and thinking that the teachings hadn't really landed or just didn't live on, between John's art of mentorings and what I'd absorbed from Tracker, they're there. They show up. It was really amazing. And I'm so grateful for that. And the other quick story is that I did not find my way to Tom through the books. I'm in a relationship with Brian Knittel, who's on the call and has been a tracker for a long, long time. And last week we had an ancestor supper, and tonight as well. And Tom is on the altar. And so the ancestor altar. And we've been sharing stories, and we shared some stories about Tom with the folks who were there last week. And, there was some polite nodding. There was some like little bit of laughing. There's a little bit of discomfort, like, whoa, they're talking with so much passion. Is it a cult? I don't know. Like there was some hesitation. And I thought, oh, yeah, they're not quite getting it. And when we were first together, Brian kept gently insisting over for years, you might want to pick up this book. And I'm like, no. And you might want to go to this class. No. And I kept resisting. Thank you, but no, thank you. Not interested. I'm on a different path, big path, healing path. No. I'm already training. I don't need another path. And it was about 2016. And Brian, persistently over time. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to go to New Jersey. It's too expensive. It's too far. I don't want to go to New Jersey. No. It was all this resistance. And then all of a sudden, Tom's coming to California. And Brian's like, Tom's coming to California, to San Diego. Are you sure? And I'm like, damn, I'm going to have to go. I'm just going to have to go to please Brian. I think that I'm going to get Brian off my back. And I remember saying to him, fine, I'm not going to do both classes. If I do one class, if I do one Tom class in my entire life and no more, which one should it be? And Brian's like, well, knowing you, I think it should be Phil 1, not standard. I'm like, fine, I don't care. Sure, whatever. I'll take Phil 1. So I pack my bags and I get down to San Diego in huge, big duffel bags. And I start meeting all the other trackers, and there's the camo and the hats and the knives and the whole thing. And I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? Okay, fine. It's only a week. I could do this, whatever. And I get there and I'm in camp and we settle in, and Malcolm's there. Lots of cool people are there, but I'm still like, oh, okay, just get through this. I'll do this for my person. And I'll never forget Tom very quietly at like quarter speed, walking from left field towards the stage for the first evening lecture in which he talked. And he hadn't even said a word, and he hadn't even reached the desk. And I had this visceral moment of like, oh, like this is important and serious and good medicine. And like, oh, wow, I'm going to be on this path. This is now for me and whoever I can touch. And I'm going to be on this path for the rest of my life. And all of that happened in like, 30 seconds as a visceral, full body sensation. And what's coming to me to share the last few words is it can be hard to talk to others in a way that really conveys the power to the point where they get to make their way to the tracker school. For me, at least, it's easy to get discouraged and like, forget it. You're not getting it. Whatever. I don't want to talk to you about it, kind of thing. And it's so important that we keep gently insisting and persisting where we feel called, because people don't know how badly they want it or need it until that moment that they do. And so may we all be able to find ways to keep bringing people to these teachings. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Just taking all this in for a moment. It's pretty cool to be surrounded by these stories and this gratitude, right? It's a good feeling. Brant was always one of those guys that we could talk music. Always liked finding interesting pieces of music here, there, and it's always good to see him every once in a while. He'd be like, "Hey, is that piece of music?" And he was almost always spot on. He's always enjoyed his depth of knowledge in music. How you doing there, Brant?
I'm doing okay. I'm really grateful to see all of these people here. I was reminded that, like, I first met Tom when he would come here to California. He would give a talk at the local bookstore, and then he'd sign books and stuff. And so I first met him there, and it was not long after 9/11, and I guess his brother-in-law died in one of the planes. And he was, he was signing stuff, but you could tell he was distracted. And I remember I sent him a letter about it long before I took any classes from him. And so I took my standard and my Phil 1 at the California Boy Scout camp. And Tom didn't teach there because it was the year that The Hunted came out, and he was out doing a press tour because the standard class started when the movie was released. So, we had a good class. I learned a lot. I had some really great instructors. And, I then started my journey when I was in his first online class called Beyond the Facade. And there's like 3 of us left that in Tracker that I know of that actually took that class. And from then on, I took a lot of online classes. And I was in one class, and this is when Tom had his bout with Lyme disease, and he was skinny as a rail, and somebody said something in the chat. I don't remember what it was, but it was something that really pissed him off. And he sat there and shouted that, like, I don't know why I'm teaching you guys. You guys should just all freaking leave. My computer went dark. My internet went blank and then came back. And, if you're around Tom physically, you can kind of feel the energy of what he can do. But when you're online, it doesn't always translate. And after that thing that happened, I just sat back and was like, ooh, this guy's got some serious mojo going on here. And, I've always appreciated that. And I've had one of those situations where I got chewed out by him online. I got chewed out in another class, and he was right about what he said. I didn't appreciate what he said at the time, but one of the things that the whole Tracker School has meant to me is that there's a whole lot of weird people around here that are weird just like I am. And I feel at home, and I feel like I can share stuff that, I obviously can't share to the mainstream peeps out there. And that's a real gift. That is such a gift. One thing I want to say is that, I've been around a lot of grief and a lot of loss from the time I was a teenager. And here's one thing that I do know is that, the mainstream culture wants you to act like it didn't happen or it doesn't matter or any of that. And, ignore that. Be real and true to who you are. And if you're feeling grief, even amongst mainstream people, just feel it. Sometimes there's people that need to see you modeling things that might be helpful to them, their own grief. I know I do that, and I'm not popular sometimes when I do that, but we're all in this together, and it's really important that we honor what we're going through. So that's it for me. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome, Brant. Thanks for that. Jamie, so much better at tech and screens than bow building. That hurts. That hurts my heart. Sometimes it's probably true, though. Sure. What's your beautiful voice doing there?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I said my journey probably began about 20 some odd years ago. And a really good friend of mine who had been part of ceremony knew my story. And my story is, in brief, that I was raised close to the land. My father raised me. My father was a scout. He actually was a prisoner of war retriever during the Cold War. And he would get dropped by airplane to go and retrieve them before execution. And he was picked because he was the person that could disappear into the bush in about 6 feet and not be seen. And he homeschooled me and raised me. My mom, when I was the little part of me, did some work, but she was raised in the city. And so I learned how to hunt. I learned how to fish. I learned how to build shelter. I learned how to grow a garden and preserve the food from that harvest. And by the time I was 13, I could feed my family. And my dad at that point said, I'm not worried about you anymore because you know how. Now we have to worry about how to make you a good community helper so that you can continue to teach other people how to do this long past when I'm gone. And I was the only child out of 7 who ever learned these things. And by the time I was 20, 25, and I'd gone to university, I found out this was not a place that most people were familiar with, So the first time I told a story about me going and the deer bringing their babies for me to see, people's eyes got wide and they thought, oh my God, this woman's crazy. And I went, okay. So it didn't take more than about 10 years for me to stop telling the stories, stop appreciating how I was raised, stop trying to teach it because no one wanted to learn, and stopped becoming anything close to what I was raised with. And I just tried to fit in the mainstream world, which I so don't. And my heart goes out to T3 because I so know that story of not fitting in the mainstream world. And a friend of mine who had known me for many, many years said at one point when I ceased to be willing to stay in this world, he said, I'd like you to read this book and I'd like you to remember who you are and how you were raised. And he gave me the tracker. And I read the tracker. And I started to remember all of the things that my father taught me and all the things that I knew. And I went, you mean there's people out there who actually appreciate this and want this in the world? My dad told me it would come, and he said it wouldn't come in his lifetime, but he said it would come, that people would come from all over the world and they would want to learn these things. And he said, and there would be a whole handful, maybe, of people that had learned and remembered and lived that way. And here I was reading a book that was telling me that there's a whole bunch of people out there. And I wanted to stay alive. And not only that, I wanted to help. And I found a school by accident, so-called, by Skeet Sutherland. And I was presenting at an Aboriginal tent in Guelph, Ontario, and he was presenting in the environmental tent. And he came to my husband's presentation on bow drill, and my husband wanted to go to his presentation on bow drill, and we found out that he was part of the tracker school. And he invited us to come to the wilderness school in Canada that he was working with, Sticks and Stones. And that was kind of the end of it, because from that point on, it was a breadcrumb trail for me to remember the things that my grandmother taught me and to remember the things that my father taught me and to actually be able to contribute and support and help places and spaces that had this. And it has been an incredible honor to step into communities where this is being lifted up and have some way that I can help. And it has been amazing that Skeet eventually said, I want you to meet my friend John. And I got to meet John. And as a result, I've been working with John ever since. I don't know how long it's been now, but it feels like at least 10, 15 years. And I felt this incredible pull early in the spring. And for several years, John had said, we got to get you out to tracker school. We got to get you out to, standard class. We got to make the connection. And it just hadn't happened. And then I felt this incredible pull this spring. And I should presence, I'm a grandmother of 6 and a mother of 12. And my oldest biological child is 35. and my oldest grandchildren are in their teens. And so, it was like, wow, okay, I have this incredible pull. I have to leave and I have to go down to tracker school. And I did philosophy 1 and 2 online years ago. And I did philosophy 1 and 2 in person this time. And the sole purpose was I needed to develop a relationship to that land. And I needed to thank Tom for saving my life and helping me to feel valuable in the world. And I'm so grateful that I got to do that. And I'm so grateful that I got to find ways over time to give back because that's what I had said. I want to be able to give back in whatever way I could serve for Tom and for Tracker School. And so I can't think of a better way than Dave asking me to do the Thanksgiving because this is one of the things that my community has asked me to do for the rest of my life. And so I'm just so grateful to have been able to share the stories and to be able to contribute and be a part of it. And it's really, really important for so many people who don't even know it yet. And I'm so grateful for Amanda's story because, yeah, these were the kinds of stories I've just heard over and over. And I found out that for the last 30 years, I've met people who've been part of Tracker School and didn't even know it. But they were all very, very connected to honoring these ways. And yeah, my elders used to tell me, we are the answers to the prayers that our elders had or our ancestors had. So don't not answer them. So thank you for hearing my words.
Many thanks, Shore. Many thanks. Yeah. We I see you there, Eileen and Daryl. We're already half an hour over. I we have to call it at some point. I am we do have a minute chat room for this class. Some folks are going to be watching this later on. A lot of people have asked if this will be recorded. It is. And within a day or two, you'll get a link from Tracker School to watch this video. And for those who did want to share but couldn't be here live, we'll be using the minute chat room. And that link is in the Zoom chat room here. And it'll also go out with the edited video link in a few days, depending on how much sleep I decide to get. Yeah, 2.5 hours, and it feels really good to be surrounded by these stories. Some tears, some laughs. Actually, real quick, you want to see something funny? All right. Hold on a minute.
Okay, what I want to show you is a very unique shelter designed actually by somebody that works very closely with me. It's a shelter that he has used and worked in for years, and we've so honored him, we actually call it the Dave Ott Shelter. And it fits right into the landscape, as you can see. It's hard to tell the one he lives in from the one he doesn't. And if any unsuspecting person comes up and says, oh my God, maybe somebody's living in here, and opens it up, you see Dave lives in the basement of this. And he over to the side. So that way, if somebody comes in, they just think it's a normal toilet.
I mean, not such a bad way to go out today, huh? So, yeah. Yeah, much appreciation for everybody who was here today. I hope we all leave here a little bit lighter and maybe a little bit more even. And we go out and we do good things. and live a good life, because that's what Tom would want. And that's what every human being should want. So I think that's it for today. Much love to y'all. You can turn your mics on and give a shout out if you want. Say hi.
Thank
You're all
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Blessings.
You,
Bye,
Dave.
everybody.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you.
Thank
Love
you.
and blessings to
Thanks,
you all
Thank you.
so much for
Happy
your
trails.
stories.
Yes.
Thank you
Bye.
so
Thank
much.
you.
Love you all.
Thanks, everyone.
So much love.
Aw,
Thanks, everyone.
totally awesome.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Blessings. Blessings.
You're all awesome.
It's truly moving through all of us.
We'll always have them in our hearts and soul. Love you.
Appreciate y'all.
All right, time to go home.
Dirt time, dirt time.
Dirt time.
Thank you, Dave. Great
Thanks,
job.
Dave. Thanks, Dave.
Great
Yeah,
job.
right on.
Right on. Love y'all.
Love
We all bye.
I gotta push the end button. It's so hard.
Hope to see you soon.
Yep. All right, I'm just gonna give a countdown because I can't just press it out of the blue. All right, here goes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Love. Yep. See y'all later.